world of mafia or organized crime, there are few names that resonate as powerfully as that of Carlo Gambino.
Don Carlo
Gambino.
Paul Castellano wasn't just a businessman. He was the powerful boss of the Gambino crime family, one of the most feared mafia organizations in American history. Known as the Howard Hughes of the mob, Castellano ruled with a blend of brains, strategy, and quiet ruthlessness. But power comes with enemies, and his life would end in one of the most infamous hits in mob history. In this video, we explore the rise and fall of Paul Castellano, the man, the boss, and the legacy he left behind. From butcher's son to mafia kingpin, Paul Castellano was born on June 26, 1915, in Brooklyn, New York. His full name was Costantino Paul Castellano, and he grew up in a modest Italian-American household. His parents were immigrants from Sicily, and his father worked as a butcher. Though Paul learned the trade of meat cutting at a young age, he was also exposed to another world, the shadowy life of organized crime. His father was connected to the local mob, and the streets of Brooklyn were thick with stories of men who rose to power through muscle, money, and fear. Paul was observant. While others in the neighborhood hustled to survive, Paul quietly studied people. Even as a teenager, he seemed more comfortable strategizing than fighting. He dropped out of school in the 8th grade to help in his father's butcher shop. This experience not only sharpened his business instincts, but also taught him the value of appearances. In the butcher shop, cleanliness and presentation mattered. Paul would carry that obsession with image into his life as a mob boss. Early criminal career. By the 1930s, Castellano was already involved in criminal activity. His first arrest came in 1934 for robbery, but he refused to talk to the police. That earned him early respect in mob circles. He joined the Mangano crime family, which would later become the Gambino family, and began to build his reputation. Unlike many gangsters of the time who focused on loan sharking and street-level rackets, Castellano gravitated toward unions and legitimate business fronts. He realized that power didn't always come from violence. It came from leverage. He took control of parts of the meat distribution industry and turned it into a front for laundering money and extorting suppliers. His company, Dial Poultry, eventually supplied chicken and meat to over 300 stores in the New York area. He also began manipulating construction unions, cement companies, and trucking operations. With his business acumen and connections, Castellano climbed the ranks quickly. Family and personal life. Paul Castellano married Nina Mano, his childhood sweetheart, and had 4 children with her. Despite being deeply involved in organized crime, Castellano saw himself as a traditional family man. He lived in a massive mansion in Taut Hill, Staten Island, which he designed to look like the White House. The estate symbolized power, wealth, and control. But behind the image of the devoted husband, Castellano was far from loyal. He had a long-running affair with his Colombian maid, Gloria Olarte, who eventually moved into the mansion and replaced Nina in his personal life. This relationship caused major tensions within his family and added to the growing perception that Castellano had lost touch with the traditional mafia code. Becoming the boss. When Carlo Gambino, the longtime boss of the Gambino crime family, died in 1976, most expected that underboss Aniello Della Croce would take over. Della Croce was a street boss, respected, feared, and deeply loyal to the old-school mafia ethos. But Gambino had different plans. He appointed Castellano, his cousin-in-law, as his successor. This decision shocked many and planted the seeds of division. Castellano's rise to power bypassed the street soldiers who had earned their stripes through decades of loyalty and bloodshed. Although Della Croce accepted the decision and convinced his faction to remain loyal to the family, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Castellano immediately began reshaping the family. He emphasized white-collar crime, discouraged drug dealing, and expanded the family's reach into construction and unions. But his style alienated many. He acted like a corporate executive rather than a traditional don. He wore suits instead of tracksuits, dined in fine restaurants, and rarely mingled with lower-level associates. Surveillance and legal trouble. As Paul Castellano's fortune multiplied and his influence reached across New York's industries, meat, construction, unions, and beyond, the attention of federal authorities intensified. Law enforcement wasn't just interested in Castellano, they were obsessed. The FBI believed he was the nerve center of the Gambino crime family, running its sprawling operations like a corporate boardroom with criminal agendas. To build a case against him, the FBI launched an extensive surveillance campaign. Their biggest breakthrough came when they successfully planted listening devices in Castellano's palatial Staten Island mansion. The operation required patience, precision, and stealth. Agents installed bugs in lamps, fixtures, and telephones. Once in place, the bugs transmitted hours of conversations, uncensored, unfiltered, and damning. The FBI now had proof of Castellano's direct involvement in organized crime. The bugged tapes became the core of a sweeping indictment under the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO, a law designed to target the top of criminal organizations rather than just the street-level enforcers. In 1985, Castellano was indicted for multiple crimes: racketeering, loan sharking, gambling, extortion, and even conspiracy to commit murder. The charges threatened to end his reign permanently. He was out on bail, but the walls were closing in. And then came the whispers. Inside the mob, rumors swirled that Castellano might strike a deal with the government. Though there was no hard evidence he would flip, the mere possibility terrified his rivals. If he cooperated, he could bring down not just his own empire, but the entire American Mafia hierarchy. This fear set off a chain of events that would become one of the most infamous chapters in Mafia history: a divided family and a fatal mistake. As Castellano faced the weight of federal prosecution, the Gambino family itself was splitting at the seams. The street guys, those who had grown up earning their stripes through violence and loyalty, felt abandoned. Castellano was not a man of the streets. He rarely visited social clubs, refused to meet with lower-ranking members, and communicated through layers of intermediaries. His leadership style created a cultural chasm in the family. On one side was Castellano's faction, business-minded, insulated, and secretive. On the other were the hardline traditionalists, led by the charismatic and volatile John Gotti. Gotti represented everything Castellano wasn't: flamboyant, accessible, feared, and adored by the working-class wise guys. But Castellano's most fatal misstep was personal, not strategic. In November 1985, Agnello Neil Della Croce, Gotti's mentor and the long-respected underboss who had helped maintain peace between the two wings of the family, died of cancer. Della Croce had been the glue that held the family together. His death shattered that balance. Castellano's decision not to attend Della Croce's wake or funeral sent a chilling message to Gotti and his loyalists. They were no longer valued. This single act was interpreted not just as disrespect, it was war, the hit at Sparks Steakhouse. On the cold evening of December 16, 1985, Paul Castellano was scheduled to meet several high-ranking members of the Gambino family for dinner at Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan. He was accompanied by Thomas Bilotti, his recently named underboss and loyal bodyguard. What Castellano didn't know was that the meeting was a trap. John Gotti had orchestrated a murder plot so daring that it would shock the criminal underworld. Dressed in long coats and stationed at key points outside Sparks, 4 hitmen waited for Castellano to arrive. Gotti and his men sat in a nearby car, watching everything unfold in real time. At approximately 5:26 p.m., Castellano's black Lincoln pulled up in front of the restaurant. As he stepped out, the gunmen swarmed. In a flash of coordinated violence, Castellano was riddled with bullets before he could react. Bilotti, exiting from the driver's seat, was gunned down moments later. With Castellano gone, John Gotti swiftly assumed control of the Gambino family. He did so without formal approval from the commission, breaking the long-standing rules of organized crime. But by then, Gotti had momentum, muscle, and popular support from the rank and file. The aftermath. The murder of Paul Castellano reverberated throughout the American Mafia. For decades, the five families had operated under a semi-civilized code, a system of governance maintained by the Commission. Under these rules, no boss could be killed without consensus from the heads of other families. Gotti had ignored that rule. His defiance sparked both admiration and outrage. Some saw him as a bold revolutionary. Others saw him as a reckless outlaw who had shattered the foundation of mob diplomacy. Over the next few years, the FBI methodically dismantled Gotti's empire. In 1992, thanks largely to the testimony of Sammy the Bull Gravano, Gotti's own underboss, Gotti was convicted on 13 counts, including murder and racketeering. Ironically, Castellano had always feared betrayal from within. He bugged his own mansion. He filtered his orders through layers. He micromanaged everything. But in the end, all of his caution couldn't save him from the very force he tried to avoid: ambition without loyalty.
In the world of mafia or organized crime, there are few names that resonate as powerfully as that of Carlo Gambino.
Gambino.
Often mistakenly mocked as a, quote, squirrel of a man by boss Joe Bonanno, Gambino defied the stereotype of the violent mobster. Instead of intimidation, he wielded silence and strategy. But who was he really? And how did he rise to become one of the most powerful mafia bosses?
Legacy. Visionary or villain, Paul Castellano remains a divisive figure in the history of the American Mafia. To his supporters, he was a visionary, a forward thinker who understood that the future of organized crime lay in legitimate fronts, not in bloody street wars. He wanted to build a mafia that could last generations, shielded from the chaos and volatility that came with constant violence. But to his enemies, and they were many, Castellano was a tyrant, a man who forgot the roots of the Mafia brotherhood. He ruled from afar, distanced himself from his soldiers, and flaunted his wealth, while others risked prison or death on the streets. His nickname, the Howard Hughes of the mob, captured the contradiction: a man of vision and isolation, power and paranoia, wealth and weakness. His assassination marked the end of one era and the beginning of another, a shift from a calculated white-collar crime back to violent street rule under Gotti. It was a turning point that would ultimately lead to the decline of the Mafia's golden age. Final thoughts. Paul Castellano's life was a paradox. He rose from the streets of Brooklyn to become one of the most powerful men in the American Mafia. Yet he died alone on a sidewalk, betrayed by those closest to him. He dreamed of making the Mafia modern, but failed to realize that tradition and brotherhood were the glue holding it all together. He was a boss who tried to build an empire, but forgot to rule the hearts of his men. In the end, Paul Castellano's story is not just about crime. It's about power, ego, betrayal, and the limits of control in a world where loyalty is always conditional. Paul Castellano's life was a dangerous dance between wealth, power, and betrayal. His downfall marked a turning point in the American Mafia and opened the door for a new era of blood and ambition. If you found this story of crime and power compelling, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of organized crime. Thanks for watching, and stay sharp.